Comandone.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, there. Good morning, everybody. Let me introduce my co-chair, Professor Comandone from Turin, Director of Oncology in Turin, Professor also in Pharmacology. So, yeah. So, we will guide you through this morning. And first of all, I'd like to thank Fondazione Ferrero for hosting this event, and especially to Dr. Bologna and his team for organizing it so well for us. So, and then I leave the word for you.
Yeah, thank you. It's always difficult for an Italian person to speak in bill languages, so I was my duty today is to introduce the speakers, very high-level speakers, and the scientific session this morning is about environmental hazard and aging. The first speech will be from Professor Bellander. I introduce himself in our Congress. He's a former professor at the Karolinska Institute, as a professor of, please correct me if I am not right, if I'm wrong, as a professor of environmental medicine and epidemiologist. And his speech will be the introduction to environmental hazard and also adult health. Per i concittadini è prevista una traduzione contemporanea in diretta, e il professor Bellander sarà il primo speaker e parlerà appunto dei pericoli nell'ambiente, dell'inquinamento e sull'incidenza che questo problema può avere sulla salute dell'anziano. Ringrazio per la presenza e diamo il via ai lavori. Grazie.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to announce that we have a small change in the program. So the two last speakers we have changed the order between them, and that will, I think, will be a better experience for you. So now I will try to give a very broad overview of different environmental factors that may be harmful for older adults. And yes, I will start with something quite simple, life expectancy. This is now the development of life expectancy over time globally. So from the end of the 18th century until now. As you can see, there has been a very important increase in life expectancy, mainly during the 1900s. And in the beginning of 1900, this was mainly due to decreases in infant mortality, but towards the end of the 1900s, it was actually a decrease. It is actually still a decrease in mortality at older age. So this is very sort of important for the perspectives that we have today. You can see some dips here. This is COVID, and this here is China, I'm afraid, only. So, yes, so this is the overall development globally. If we go then to what may be the reasons for this remarkable development. So we often speak about social determinants of health, and you've no doubt seen these pictures similar to that. So we have education, we have healthcare, We have neighborhood environment, sanitation, things like that, social community, and economy, of course. And so if we go then to something equally sort of simple, like gross domestic product as a measure of economic development, not maybe the best measure of economic development, but it's one frequently used. And here we have then, it doesn't, sorry, this, here it is. So we have a scale here from $1,000 per capita to $100,000 per capita, and we have from 60 years to 80 years here, and you see that most countries follow this line, and there is also development from to the right here, so going up this ladder, which is very good. However, there are also differences within countries, and if you then take a very sort of more individual perspective on this, or surrounding countries, people living below with ability to spend $3 a day, US dollars a day or less. They were in 1990, they were more than 2 billion, and now there are less than 1 billion. So for the very poor, it has been a very fantastic development. If we go to those who can spend 10 US dollars or less, which is now more or less the half of the world population, the situation is not that good. So here there's something that needs to be done, but from the economical point of view. If we then look at the upper part of this spectrum, comparing countries, there are some sort of exceptions to this rule, and you can see Japan is a bit above this line, the United States is a bit below, Russia is really below, and then we have, it seems like when you come above like 30,000 US dollars per capita, not much more will happen. So other factors than economy will be more important for the lifespan. I would like to have had the opportunity to show this in the like health span rather than lifespan, but I'm afraid that that data doesn't exist. At least not in this global context and historical context. So within a country, you can find similar differences. This is life expectancy at 40 years of age in Sweden, and we have the scale here is the age, expected age at death, between 70 and 90 years here, and you have percentiles of income for men and for women. And you can see that there are several lines here, and they relate to different decades. So it goes from the 1960s to the 2010s. And you can see in the 1960s, well, then we have ventiles. So if you look at the 70s, which are the sort of yellow-brown thing here, you can see that there is a difference between those with the lowest income, that are about 70 years then, to the highest income, which is 76 or something. And then this has developed over time. So the most recent, 2010, then we have a larger difference, because it's like 74 here, and we have more than 85, 86 here. So it's not that the differences according to economic circumstances are decreasing, even in a country like Sweden. So this is, I think, is a very important background. thinking of other factors. So we need to always, when we do studies about risks for health or mortality, we need to control for something that has to do with these differences. And we usually use either income or education for this, but it's really important that we do this, otherwise we will not be able to tease out the effects that we're interested in. Okay, so then the environment. So environment is not sort of a very old concept. It was introduced in the 1800s only, in the English language, probably from French, I guess. Before you spoke about nature, so there was environment. It's not the same as nature, so the environment is something that we have created. Nature is something that we came into. But the idea not so long ago was that there was not such a big difference between environment and nature. So even the Nobel Prize laureate in physics, Robert Millikan, in 1930, he wrote that we can sleep in peace with the consciousness that the Creator has put some foolproof elements into his handiwork, and that man is powerless to do it any titanic physical damage anyway. So the idea was that we scratch on the surface, but not much happens. Of course, this was overturned in the 1960s with the book Silent Spring from Rachel Carson, showing that persistent organic compounds like DDT and others were harmful to the reproduction of birds. So, and this was sort of an eye-opener for me, at least, when I read it, and for many people. And this actually sparked a development of interest in the environment. And in 1972, just 10 years after that, there was the United Nations Conference on the Environment in Stockholm. And there it was understood that the planet needs management. There are processes ongoing that have a planetary scale, and they need to be managed. But the UN didn't think that UN was the right body to do this, and there was no other sort of global body that could do it, so it was left to the member states. So the UN gave this sort of to the member states to deal with. So, and that the idea that we need to work on a global solution to our problems, I think is quite clear now. Was not that clear at the moment in the people's thinking, but yeah, as you all know, it's not so easy to make all the states agree on what to do. Before that, just a couple of years before that, 1968, we saw this picture, Earthrise, seen from the moon. So I think that this picture, perhaps more than the UN conference, gave the idea to people that we live in a confined space, in space. We need to take care of this rather thin layer of a biosphere where we can live. And there is really no alternative. Now there are people thinking of establishing human life on Mars and other places, but I think we will have to deal with our globe for considerable time. And then, are there economists here, for instance? Any economists here? So no economists. Okay, so no one will get offended then. So good. So anyone who believes exponential growth can go on forever in a finite world is either a madman or an economist. This was coined in 1970s. The origin is a bit vague, but it has been repeated many times. So what do we mean by this then? So let's go to the big temporal picture, the geological eras. These are then this is now the temperature. The scale here is degrees in comparison to the average in 1960 and 1990. And we have, so in each segment here, we have a different scale. So as you can see, we have had very big variations in temperature long time ago. And then we go into more our time here. So this is now the end of the ice period, glacial period. And here, what is here, this unprecedented stability of the climate we call Holocene. And this is the advent of agriculture. This is the base, which is in turn basis of the civilizations that we know. So this is sort of a unique period in the history of the Earth. And now we're sort of, the temperature is going up rapidly in comparison. So now we were at the temperatures that were not present in Earth until for the last 10 million years or so. And this has, of course, sparked a lot of interest, and we will hear more from Jan Semenza about this, what this can mean for adult health. And this is not the only thing that has happened lately, so we speak about the Great Acceleration. So these are Earth system trends, and many of these are sort of exponential growth, and might be difficult to see from the back, but we have not only population here, GDP, and direct investments, urban populations, and primary energy care, and so on. They all show more or less the same pattern, so with a very strong increase after the 1950s. And if we go to environmental factors, we have the carbon dioxide, of course. We have some nitrous oxides and methane. And here is something that actually is a positive thing. We have been able to, on a global scale, decrease the emissions of freons and other substances that hurt the stratospheric ozone layer. So this is one of the examples that we actually can do something on a global scale when it's necessary. There are other things here that show a cap. It doesn't increase anymore, but this is sort of tragic because this marine fish capture that we cannot increase anymore. We'll have to, if we want to eat more fish, we have to farm it. The ozone layer and the freons is not the only example of a decrease of a contaminant on a global scale. This is now lead in ice, Arctic ice. You can take out a column of ice, and then you can slice it, and you can look at lead in the different levels there, and which is the time scale then. And as you can see, there was an increase of lead in the atmosphere in the Greek and Roman area. There was a lot of lead being used for piping, in tubing for water. It was also used to sweeten wine and sweeten and conserve wine. So if you boil wine in a lead container, you will produce lead acetate, which is sweet and also hampers follow development, deterioration of the wine, but not so good to drink, probably. We had lead in petrol for the sort of as a lubricant of the engine, and we've stopped with that. So now we have, this is an old slide. I don't know how this has has developed after, but I assume that it has been continuing to go down. So it is possible to do things on a global scale, but there are few examples. Another thing that has happened over the span of the years is the challenge to biodiversity. And here is just one aspect of that. There are many aspects of the challenges of biodiversity. So here is mammal biomass. Before agriculture, when we were hunter-gatherers, it decreased from 20 megaton carbon to 15 megaton carbon, and that is the hunting. But after the event of agriculture, so 10,000 years before present, we have gone down to 3 megatons. So now, this is now also including sea, ocean mammals. So the wild mammals are only 4% of the whole weight of mammals on the earth. We consider it 1/3 of the whole weight, and our cattle the other 2/3. So this is a fundamental change, of course, over a long perspective. So, and it's not only that we have very few wild animals now in comparison with before, we also use a lot of land for our cattle and livestock, which is a problem in itself. Now, going to the more present situation, what might be the different factors that are important when you consider adult health? And I would say that the factors are the same as health in all parts of life, I would say, because in all phases of life, because most of the diseases that these factors influence are the most present diseases in elderly. So we have then climate change that we will speak more about in just a while. Waste management, plastics in seas and so on. And of course, differences now in the conditions for agriculture. So we're talking about real subsistence, so how can you survive in different parts of the world now that the climate is changing. And there are also other things that are, so the pollen seasons are changing and things like that, and we have zoonosis going around also. So other things are happening because of the climate change, not directly. We all need to have safe water, and this is already a problem in many parts of the world. Not only to have safer, but to have water at all. We need to have safe foods, that is also healthy, of course. And we need to have the production of food in a way that doesn't hurt the environment. We have had a big problem with heavy metals like lead, arsenic, mercury, and cadmium, and so on. And some of these are still problematic. Lead is one of the least problematic at the moment. So this is crystal glass, where lead is tightly bound, so it's no problem to drink wine from a crystal glass. There would be if it was not tightly bound. So going then to cities, as you probably all know, not many years ago that it happened that the number of inhabitants in cities exceeded the number of inhabitants in the rest of the environment, so outside city environment. It took a long time to come to this point. I mean, the first cities came about like 7,000 years ago. And only just recently they sort of managed to win the race between cities and countryside. Note that Alexandria and Rome had 1 million inhabitants each, at year zero, and how they managed to organize city life with the provisions and the garbage at that time, I have no idea, really. So cities have been dangerous places to be in. So, and this is from New York City. We have the scale here on the y-axis is the death per 100,000 population and year. And here we have a temporal scale from 1800 to more or less present. As you can see, there's been a nice development. The mortality has gone down. And what has happened in this area is you can see that there are many diseases. So we have cholera, measles, scarlet fever, yellow fever, and so on. So what has happened here is sanitation. It's pasteurization of milk, for instance, and chlorination of water, and vaccines. So without sanitation action and vaccines, we will not be able to live safely in cities. And yes, so now in the 1800s, the life expectancy in New York was several years shorter than in the rest of the US. Now it's a couple of years longer than the rest of the US. And it has been debated, why is this? One suggestion, I think this is quite well funded, is that New Yorkers, they walk a lot. So it's the city structure invites physical transport. But in the cities, we still have problems. We have air pollution, both from traffic and from other sources, and also coming in from other regions, of course, but that is everywhere. We have noise. You can have noise in other places also, but here we have noise close to where people live. And in many, many cities, there's a lack of green space, which we have shown in several studies is bad for your health. We can discuss how that works also in a separate occasion. We have urban heat islands, so it's often more higher temperatures in the city than in the surrounding countryside. The effects of extreme weather ones you can see everywhere, but where there's a lot of people, so densely populated areas, it can become really catastrophic. And cities, I think, is, and we will hear about that from Lena Dahlberg, the place where people are more sort of socially isolated and lonely. So parenthesis, several hundred years ago, there was a land reform in Sweden because of the heritage. Everybody owned lands that were sort of small patches of land everywhere, and that was sort of not very productive. So they made this reform so you could concatenate your land parts. And that led to the fact that people moved away from the villages out to their own land. So, and there's a lot of witnesses saying that life in the countryside became boring because you didn't have neighbors close by. So I don't know if you build upon that for the for the cities also. And on a global scale, so the burning of solid fuels is a big problem for air pollution. It's a problem also when you burn it in your stove at home. But then it's more in both cases, it's the one that actually is managing the fire that is the most exposed. And yes, so, and if you don't do that, you have a gas stove perhaps, and then it will be the indoor air problem. This is our own gas stove, by the way, so the old one. So, and then in your house, you will have a cupboard with detergents and oils and thinners and all that. I mean, we have a lot of chemicals in our houses, and they add to the chemicals that are used in the production of goods in other places and so on. So now, here they are, all the pictures that I showed. Which would you choose as the most important for adult health in this moment? Any suggestion? Just shout out. Sorry, I didn't hear.
Plastic.
The last one?
Last on the second line.
The last in the second line. The waste. The waste, yeah. This picture is from Crete. They use plastics to do sort of hothouses for the production of fruits and vegetables, and they just sort of throw it away when it's not useful anymore. So, and then it sort of deteriorates, and they will come into the seas. So that's one suggestion. Some other suggestion?
Social isolation.
Isolation, social isolation. We will hear more about that. I haven't seen any global data on social isolation. Maybe Lena will correct me on that later. It's difficult to compare with the rest here, yeah. But certainly important. Well, actually, it is air pollution. So we have both urban air pollution and similar here, and we have the air pollution from burning of solid fluids. Together, these are considered to be the biggest environmental risk factor for all-cause death. This is from a couple of years ago. There is an update also now on this, and Francesco Forestieri will sort of get into the details of this also later. So it's here it said that the number of deaths globally per year is 8 million, comparable to that of tobacco and dietary risks. And here, down here, we have high or low temperature, because low temperature is also a risk, of course. And this will increase. Hopefully, air pollution will decrease, and tobacco as well, dietary risk. So, but for many years to come, we will have temperature-related risk going on. So what is then air pollution? So Francesca Forestieri will go into more details of this, but we have particles, we have gases. Here is a picture of what it might look like if you collect air pollution on a filter. So you have mineral particles, quite big. Here is the scale, 8 micrometers. And we have salt particles that are more sort of dice-shaped. We have these globular spheres from combustion. We have some fibers here. Used to be asbestos fibers, but no longer is used in brakes for cars, for instance. So this is probably not asbestos fiber. The small spheres here, this is from diesel suits. So they are very small particles when they exit from the exhaust. They agglomerate directly to bigger particle batteries, but they look like this when you take them on a filter. So, and here you will have more about the particles in a while, but here is the one aspect that I think is interesting. So there is a combined effect of air pollution and climate change. So we know that there are short-term effects from particulate matter. This is then PM 2.5, which is particles that are 2.5 microns or smaller, and of ozone on mortality, and that is stronger in summer. People spend more time outdoors. Infiltration into buildings may be bigger because you keep your windows open depending on where you live. And the composition might be different. And then we have wildfires. And we looked at the wildfires that happened around Moscow in 2010. And here the daily deaths here in Moscow during that summer. So this is the dates of that which has happened, and this is the number of daily non-accidental deaths. So this is the black line here is what we would expect, about 300 deaths per day, based on what happened summers before this. And the yellow-brown line here is the effect from daily high temperature, right? And on top of that, there is an effect of accumulated several days of temperature, so that you had the effect of temperatures not today, but yesterday and the day before that, and so on. And then on top of that, we have the pollution effect, which is sort of not so big in comparison to the temperature effect, but there is then an interaction effect, a combined effect of air pollution and temperature. So summing up to the whole, the peak here in so 900, so 3 times as many deaths per day as you would expect, which is sort of, was often you don't notice these things in the hospital, but here it was noted also in the hospital. You don't need statistics to understand that this is a problem. And another little point is that you might not think that the exposure to air pollution when you're young will be a problem for you when you're old. But it may be, because we have seen in Sweden and in many other places also that there is a decreased or hampered development of the lung function in childhood and early in adolescence. The lung function peaks at around 20, 25 years of age. And then you will not reach, if you're compromised because of environmental factors, you will not reach your optimum lung function. And that is not so good, because the lung function will decrease slowly over the time, and when it gets too low, you will have health problems. Of course, you can make it go down quicker, if you like, by smoking, for instance. But also things that happen in childhood may affect late adult health. Just a note, things are coming out now that also noise can have something to do with cognitive decline. This is now sort of debated, and we don't really know how this works, but I think it's interesting that we've seen in Stockholm nothing to do really with aircraft noise, neither with road traffic noise, but perhaps something with railing noise, and this may be due to sleep disturbances, for instance. So that is, I think, also something that we need to look into more in the future. So maybe someone of you is thinking now, so what can I do about this? I'm afraid this is not so it's depressing, isn't it? No? So we have all seen these terrible pictures of plastic waste in the oceans. So, and what can we do about that? I think it's really important that we understand where we should sort of focus our attention. So what has happened here in the UK, in Sweden, and I think also in Italy, that the plastic straws have been banned, right? Does this have anything at all to do with the garbage in the oceans? I would say no. Because if you go to science, you will see that the debris, plastic debris in the oceans, between 80 and 90% of that comes from only 10 rivers. So, I mean, whether we use plastic straws or not here will not have anything to do with that at all. So, when we act locally, we have to have this sort of global perspective in mind. Otherwise, it will be just sort of, symbolic, what we do. So, and I think that goes on for many things that are global reach. So, concluding then, so I think that there are global environmental challenges in the health of, to the health of older adults. We have the heat and unstable climate, and we will hear more about that. We need to have food supply for 10 billion people, and it needs to be safe and healthy. There is a shortage already of arable land, a shortage of water, shortage of fuels, shortage of minerals, and we will have to deal with that also. Air pollution will continue to be a problem for a long time, but fortunately decreasing in many places. We have challenges related to biodiversity, and I think that when it comes to climate change, we know what we can do. It's when it comes to biodiversity, it's not quite clear what we can do. So I think for the future, when we have dealt with climate change that I hope we can deal with soon, we will have to deal with biodiversity. So that I think that is really important. But there are many unknowns. So what will happen with fossil fuels, or what will happen with urbanizations? We have had this trend now for 7,000 years of urbanization. Will it go on? Economic growth, I used gross domestic product as a measure of economic growth. Is that the only measure? Should we measure it in somewhere else? And will it grow even? Or do we have sort of shrinking economies? Migration, people living around the equator will have to move. And where will they move? We will certainly have new pandemics. We have had a secular trend towards peace, less and less people dying, proportion of people dying from violence, both small-scale and big-scale violence. Will that go on? So, with that, thank you.
This morning we have decided with Professor Bellander to have a short discussion after each presentation. Possiamo fare una breve discussione immediatamente in modo da non perdere le parti essenziali della presentazione. Ci sarà poi, se abbiamo il tempo, una discussione finale prima del lunch. Prego.
Possiamo fare domande anche in italiano.
Grazie. Vorrei porre l'attenzione su due aspetti dell'ambiente, quello sociale e fisico, perché mi sembra molto importante, mi sembra anche che fondamentalmente non sono separati, chiaramente non separati, però purtroppo la ricerca nostra è molto separata. Abbiamo specialità, discipline che lavorano sull'aspetto dell'ambiente sociale e altre discipline che lavorano sull'ambiente fisico. E in qualche modo noi clinici ci ritroviamo nel mezzo perché vediamo poi le conseguenze nei nostri pazienti sia dell'ambiente sociale, proveniente dall'ambiente sociale che dall'ambiente fisico. Vorrei un pochino avere una tua idea su come si può in qualche modo riuscire a aiutare a avere una ricerca un pochino più integrata su questi due mondi.
So I will repeat the question in English. And so what can we do to unify our efforts in dealing with the social environment and the physical environment? So I agree. I mean, they are connected. Obviously, they're very connected. Not only the example that I gave about the sort of boredom in the countryside, it's also the physical structure of a city. If you want to have social interaction, you have to have physical space for social interaction. So they are actually very well connected, I would say, in the real life. In research, they're not so connected. So that is something that I think we could improve considerably to have more research on mapping spaces for social interaction. I know that at Stockholm there is a project going on mapping spaces where there is crime. So I mean there are different efforts to go to the geography of social factors. And I think when you think of foodstuffs, also if you have your intent that you want to eat healthy food, you have to have a shop nearby where you can find it. So I mean there are many factors that have to do with geography that influence all of these things.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I wonder whether the results that you show about air pollution and death is mainly driven by the fact that most of the studies are on air pollution, while, for example, on plastic exposure or climate change, the literature is less.
So, I mean, from toxicology, you can derive a lot of information on things like additives in plastics and plastics themselves, and persistent organic compounds and so on. The problem is that it's so difficult to assess the population exposure, because we are all, I mean, for air pollution, we know where it is, and we know how people move. We know where people are and where people move. So people move across different levels of air pollution. We can investigate that. These other compounds that we get in with the food and the drinks, and we inhale them and so on, we have them in our homes. When we clean our homes, we have all these things going around. So much more difficult to characterize the exposure. So there we have to rely on toxicology, which is a different way of working than it is with air pollution, for instance, because the main information on air pollution that we got from the early studies was from geography. Where is air pollution higher than other places? So it was epidemiology, environmental epidemiology. We didn't have toxicology on air pollutants at that time. We have that now, so now we can see what are the mechanisms and so on. But for the toxins that are ubiquitous, it's the other way around. We have toxicology, but we don't have epidemiology.
Popoli, University of Turin. You made a huge list of environmental stressors. I wonder if you could just briefly comment on the actual interaction among those different stressors, so interactions like additional or synergistic effects. Could you comment on it? No, different stressors. And often they interact with each other.
Yes, I think this is the interaction between different stresses is very important, and some of these stresses actually could work through the same or similar, at least, mechanisms. If you think of them as stressors, right? So, So noise, one thing is noise and air pollution. They are often in the same places. It's difficult to disentangle these effects, and maybe there is an interaction effect also, but that's even more difficult to show. Many of these are linked to living in an urban space. And then also, if you think about long-term effects of different air pollutants, it's difficult to disentangle which is which, because they are present at the same time. And so if you live in one place, you have high levels of more or less all the air pollutants. So it's difficult to understand which one it is. So this is, we discussed this many years ago with the car manufacturers, and they said, just tell me what it is in air pollution that is so dangerous. We will take it away. No problem. We can take everything away, but not at the same time. We can only take away a couple of things from the exhaust. So it's a very valid point, but not so easy.
Professor, I'm here. This time has been declared the time of the Third World War in small paces, as Pope Francis I said in his intervention 1 year or 2 years ago. And my question is very precise. I didn't find any kind of report of the impact of the war on the situation of pollution and the destruction of resources and so on. Of course, we know there is a direct effect with the bombs, and so we think about the great effect, the great negative effect in Ukraine, and so. But we know that we have at least 66 different wars, small wars, and small conflicts in the war, as the United Nations says. Which are the consequences of this conflict on the environment and the pollution?
Yeah, so this is really important aspects. I disregarded a bit, perhaps, in my introduction. I think a war scene is, of course, the most difficult environment you can think of for an adult person. There are also long-term consequences. Also after the war, there will be lots of destruction and contamination. So I think this needs to be addressed much more than it has been done. I don't have a good solution to how to do that, but I think it's really important. Yeah.
Tom.
Thank you. We stop here. Thank you very much.